I have further evidence that Dan McClellan is wrong. Yahweh did not receive an inheritance from the Canaanite god El. In Deuteronomy 32 and verse 39 in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm using the Dead Sea Scrolls Interlinear Bible by Lexham that you can purchase online for $30, and it's an excellent investment. It says here that the Dead Sea Scrolls explain that it says, there is no God beside me. All right, and it's Yahweh speaking is the context. And I looked up beside in the Brown Driver Briggs for Deuteronomy 32 and verse 39. It means except, right? So there's no God except Yahweh is the context. And there is no Dead Sea Scroll manuscript for Deuteronomy 32 and verse 36. Therefore, we'll look in the Codex Vaticanus, which dates to the 4th century CE, and it's the earliest almost completed Septuagint, which it does say Kyrios, which is the primary substitute for the Tetragrammaton. And therefore, it is actually saying the Masoretic texts are right in saying that Yahweh is speaking. And so from 36 to 39, it's Yahweh speaking, explaining that he is God and there is no other besides him. Again, in the same chapter before Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9, which Dan McClellan butchers out of context, it says in verse 6 that Yahweh is the creator of Israel, is the context. And Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 6 explains that Yahweh chose Israel as his possession, which it says the same thing in Deuteronomy 7 verse 7, that Yahweh chose his people. So in verse 9 of Deuteronomy 32, it's being mistranslated because the word that they're translated as allotted can mean simply a lot or a portion, and heritage can be translated as possession. Here's the evidence that the word chabel can be translated as lot. It doesn't even say allotted as a possible definition in the Strongs. And the last word that is being translated as inheritance, it can mean possession. Dan McClellan argues that the primary definition is inheritance. However, even in his lexicon that he was reading, he explains that possession is a possible definition. And when the context is that Yahweh is God, there is no other, and he chose Israel, then it can't possibly be that it has to be defined as inheritance. Notice how in Deuteronomy 32 verse 8 of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it simply says Elyon, the Most High, and it doesn't say El. Outside of the Bible, the earliest mention of Elyon is 750 BCE. It appears in the Sapphire Treaty inscription, and it can possibly mean that it's El and Elyon is what scholars, this is debated by scholars, and it is understood by groups of scholars that it says El and Elyon, that Elyon's being mentioned separately from El, the Canaanite god. And there is no Dead Sea Scroll manuscript for Genesis 2 and verse 4. However, in the Codex Vaticanus, it does say that Kyrios, which is the primary substitute for the Tetragrammaton, created the heavens and the earth. So it's saying Yahweh created heavens and the earth. And in the Codex Vaticanus for Genesis 14 and verse 22, it says that Ton Theon, Ton Hepsepson, right, which is El Elyon, the Most High, is the creator of the heavens and the earth. So the context of Genesis is that Yahweh is El Elyon. So there's plenty of Bibles that support my position, translating as Jacob was his own possession, or that he chose Israel for himself, or that Jacob is his allotted portion, etc. Even the New Living Translation, for the people of Israel belong to Yahweh, Jacob is his special possession. So the context of Deuteronomy demonstrates that Dan McClellan and scholars that are suggesting that it has to be understood that Yahweh is receiving an inheritance are nothing but people that deny the context of the very chapter that they're reading from, because since Yahweh is God and there is no other, and he created Israel, it's not possible for the context of Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, that a separate God, a separate deity is giving Yahweh an inheritance.